Hi and welcome to episode 7 of Beating BDD, a podcast about body dysmorphic disorder produced by me, Claire Atherton, on behalf of the BDD Foundation in the UK. This time it's the turn of Alex Mummery to share his story. For Alex, a chance comment about the shape of his head at the age of 13 kick-started 10 years of BDD. During that time he wore his hair long to try and disguise the perceived flaw. Today he keeps his head completely shaved and is training to become an educational psychologist. Hi Alex, thanks very much for agreeing to come in and share your story with us today.
You're welcome.
How would you say you describe yourself these days? Would you say you're someone with BDD, someone in recovery from BDD, or someone who used to have BDD?
I think I would still say I am someone with BDD, and I think through recovery I'm now at a point where it's at a very manageable level that causes me next to no anxiety, which is a long way from how it used to be, and is a huge relief just to be able to say that, really. And I'm quite comfortable with the idea of having BDD, still seeing myself probably in a certain way that might be different to how other people see me. But the fact that that causes no anxiety means that it's not really a problem, to be honest.
Oh, that's great. How long would you say that's been the case for, that you've been at that sort of stage with your recovery?
Probably, so I'm 33 now. And I think I probably started my process of recovery when I was about 25. Although I think there was a time before that led up to actually fully confronting it, that meant I was able to confront it. So I started receiving CBT at 25. And I think probably a couple of years after that, I think most of the symptoms were pretty much gone.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Just before we started recording, you were telling me about the fact that you're the third person now, actually, who said to me on the trot that they're studying some type of psychology. Yeah. And you were saying you're studying to be an educational psychologist.
That's right, yeah.
What can you tell me about that, and especially what you've learned from that process about BDD?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably quite common for people with BDD or similar issues. I think often when you've been through that process of recovery and something like CBT has helped you, I think that really inspires you to want to help other people in a similar way. Yeah, so educational psychology, that led on for many years. I was a teaching assistant. Yeah, and I think it's obviously very rewarding to help people in a similar way, perhaps to the way that you were helped. And as part of my training at the moment, I'm conducting research into body dysmorphia as well, to try and see how it could be better identified in young people, which was kind of a big problem for me when I was a young person. The fact that I didn't know I had it and no one else knew I had it. I think it probably could have been sorted out a lot sooner, given the right help from someone like an educational psychologist. So I think, having been through certain experiences yourself definitely leads you towards a career in helping other people.
And what would you say that you've learned specifically about BDD from the research you've been doing? You mentioned something about brain behaviour in people with BDD that might be interesting for listeners to hear about.
Yeah, so for me it was a huge comfort to learn about brain differences between people with body dysmorphia and people without it, and other forms of OCD as well. But to learn that people with body dysmorphia seem to have that detail-focused element to the way they perceive the world as a result of actually kind of a defective visual processing part of the brain. Well, sort of defective, but let's say different, because it has its advantages. But that real detail focus, that means when we look in the mirror, we go straight to that part of our body that we're unhappy with, obsessed with, and that's almost all we see. And we're not processing our face like other people are processing our face, which is to take the whole face holistically and process it as a whole. We tend to look at faces as separate features, which has that quirk of making people with body dysmorphia far above average at recognizing faces. There was an experiment that faces were shown upside down, and the people with body dysmorphia were much better at recognizing the same faces that they'd seen before in an earlier part of the experiment, because they were processing individual features, so they could still recognize, those are the same eyes that I saw the other way up. So yeah, little quirks like that I find very interesting, but also kind of comforting, to know that that maybe we're literally seeing things differently to other people.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
With that in mind then, when you look in the mirror now, how do you feel about what you see now compared to how you felt before?
I think often I don't feel very much. And I think being aware of things like that and understanding that what you're seeing is not what other people are seeing, that does, to some degree, mean that you start to see it differently as well. And you probably start to focus less on those parts that you previously obsessed over. So you do start to see yourself a bit differently, but also, you know, there are those times maybe where you do still focus in on the same things that maybe you used to. And I guess it results in maybe a sense of mild dissatisfaction rather than intense anxiety. And I don't think that's very different to what anyone else experiences when they look in the mirror a lot of the time. I don't think there's many people who are, 100% pleased with every aspect of their appearance. Everyone would probably change something. So I feel it's more getting to that point where it's okay to be not 100% satisfied with the way you look, as long as it doesn't cause you any anxiety and doesn't disrupt your everyday, existence. You can still go about your day, or you can walk away from the mirror and just think, that's, never mind.
Yeah. Can we talk now a bit about when your BDD first appeared and how it manifested itself?
It's sometimes hard to remember exactly, but I think I was around 13, and I think one of my good friends, still one of my very good friends, I think he just made one comment. I mean, I used to tease him, as young boys do. Well, just young teenagers tend to be a bit cruel with each other. I used to tease him about his weight, and I think he was trying to get back at me. And he just kind of said, well, you've got a funny shaped head. And I remember thinking, do I? Never crossed my mind before. And I think I must have gone home that day, or maybe went to the toilets at school and was suddenly like looking in the mirror, thinking, do I have a strange shaped head? And then slowly it just snowballed into an all-consuming obsession. But yeah, I mean, I think maybe the seeds were there before that as well. It's sometimes hard to say, but I do remember being very self-conscious about things as a quite a small child, in the way that maybe other children weren't. One of my earliest experiences, in fact my first ever memory, is kind of being laughed at by my whole family. I remember sitting in like one of those high chairs, and my female cousin came up behind me and put these sort of clip-on earrings on me. And I remember literally as a baby, and all my family kind of laughing and pointing. And obviously they weren't being cruel. It was just, oh, look at young Alex with those clip-on earrings. And I remember the feeling of shame at such a young age. It's my first memory.
Wow.
And that, who knows, that could be some kind of seed.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And so when you said that it continued to develop and became this huge obsession, then to what extent was it taking over your life when it had really kind of reached a peak for you?
It was always in the back of my mind, at the very least. I was usually able to function. I know some people become housebound. They won't even let their parents see them at times. And it was never that level, but it was always somewhere on my mind. That there were peaks of intense anxiety and moments when I would find myself unable to walk away from the mirror. And I used to film myself and take photos of myself a lot, unable to put the camera down. And yeah, the anxiety would just get worse and worse the more I did that. So if it wasn't one of those moments where things really peaked, there was always a low level of anxiety. So for about 10 years, there was this low level, at least a low level of anxiety that never really went away.
What kind of thoughts did you used to have? Do you remember now?
Yeah, there was definitely a feeling of I'm different to everyone else. And that usually came about through just constant comparison to other people, looking at the shape of other people's heads and thinking, oh, their head's much more normal than mine. If only my head was normal like their head. So feeling quite separate from other people and feeling almost like I wasn't part of the human race, at least physically. Sort of, that there was me and then everyone else was over, enjoying life. And just this sense of if only I had a normal shaped head like everyone else, I could enjoy this life.
And was that the only thing you ever picked on? So it wasn't like your BDD was moving around your body as your anxieties sort of ebbed and flowed, or as other things happened to you?
I think everyone seems to have a few things that seem to come in a bit of a hierarchy. So, yeah, my hierarchy was shape of my head, followed by asymmetry in my cheekbones, and then my nose, which was quite a lot lower down, I would say, than the other two. And they definitely came in that order. And so, yeah, there are maybe those times when one of my disguising behaviours was to grow my hair very long and obviously spend a long time getting my hair just right so that I thought it disguised the shape of my head. And so when I got my hair just right and it felt normal, then the focus would shift onto, oh yeah, my cheekbones, one of them is different to the other one. There's some asymmetry there. And then for whatever reason I was happy with my cheekbones that day, then it would go onto the nose and, oh yeah, but your nose is crooked.
Did you ever consider taking any kind of drastic action? I mean, I've spoken to people who had surgery or at least thought about surgery or anything like that.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. I mean, it's quite hard to change the shape of your head.
Yes.
Probably, fortunately, because if you could, then I might have done it,
Yeah.
It's probably quite good that you can't. I did think about surgery on my cheekbones, which is possible, I think, but probably it's not a very common thing to have done. I didn't really entertain it too much. Definitely wanted something like that, but I mean, I'm sure it's also very expensive, and then of course, yeah, surgery on my nose perhaps as well. But yeah, I guess it was never quite so bad that I actually followed through with those thoughts. But definitely those thoughts were very often there, like, oh, well, I could always get it fixed. And at least then I wouldn't think about those things. But I'm sure if I'd had my cheekbones fixed or my nose fixed, there would have been some new things that emerged to complete the set.
Yeah. Did anyone in your family have any idea of what was going through your mind?
No, and that was one of the problems, really. I think I dropped hints to my parents, and it's not their fault, but I was pretty much dismissed. My family definitely thought I was very vain, and they used to kind of make a lot of comments about, oh, Alex is so vain, he thinks he's so good looking. And I used to think, that's really not what I think. But also, that used to make me think, stop being so vain. Stop. And just that added an extra dimension of, I guess, feeling a bit ashamed about it. And feeling like, yeah, just stop it, But never fully revealing the extent of my obsession and my anxiety. So often, I remember my sister finding a camera that had lots of pictures of me on it. And she just thought, oh, you're so vain. And I remember feeling very ashamed that she'd found these pictures and so embarrassed. Yeah, and it's only recently that I told them, once I'd gotten over it. But, yeah, I mean, if I had revealed the extent of it at the time, maybe it could have been dealt with sooner. But I think also at the time, I didn't know what body dysmorphia was, and was so in the midst of it that it would have been very hard to realise that the problem was internal rather than external. And I think that's such a big obstacle for young people with body dysmorphia. It's that just initially realising even yourself that you have body dysmorphia rather than an abnormal appearance. Because anyone with body dysmorphia thinks, or they meet anyone else with body dysmorphia, and we all know that feeling of, well, you can't have body dysmorphia, you look normal. And, in a room full of people with BDD, everyone is thinking, I'm the only one with body dysmorphia, everyone else is normal. Oh, sorry, no, everyone else has body dysmorphia. I'm the only one that doesn't. Sorry,
right. Yeah.
I'm the freak here. So yeah, it's very hard to realise that you have it, and that makes it hard for anyone else to realise you have it, because there's no, apart from maybe signs of anxiety, which aren't unusual, especially in teenagers, there's no outward signs of it.
What was it then that caused you to eventually seek help?
Well, at 25, I'd been in a long-term relationship for 7 years, and that ended, and that caused a huge spike in all the symptoms, because I think being in a relationship keeps certain things at bay. You've got that person to kind of fall back on. I mean, you're probably using them as some kind of emotional crutch a lot of the time. But it is a comfort to have someone and to feel loved. And you may have a lot of insecurities even within that relationship. But when that's taken away and suddenly you're on your own and you're single, and as far as you're concerned, no one's ever going to be interested in you ever again, and you've lost the one person that was interested in you. So, yeah, there was this huge spike in anxiety and the feelings of looking abnormal. That went through the roof as well. And so I think after that period, being single, eventually sort of finding my feet a bit, meeting new people, and slowly gaining a bit of confidence and a bit of a realization that, other people don't seem to see it the way I do, sort of dating and, just, you'll have setbacks in the world of dating, but if you have a few good dates, it starts to give you just a bit of confidence that you might not die alone, And so I think after a while of that, and I got a new girlfriend, and I think a short while after that, just gaining enough insight kind of from that experience and enough confidence to think I'd rather not have this low level of anxiety that's all pervasive throughout my life. I think I want to get rid of that, and then going to a GP and being given CBT on the NHS. And it wasn't BDD specific CBT, but we spoke about my image concerns without calling it body dysmorphia, I think, throughout the sessions. That was the main focus of them. It was a trainee clinical psychologist. I'm not even sure if he knew what body dysmorphia was, because a lot of professionals don't. But even though it was generic CBT, that kind of realigning my thought processes onto a more kind of healthy track eventually led to the symptoms kind of resolving themselves. And I think it's probably also a factor of getting older. As you get a bit older, you start to, I think, gain a bit more metacognitive awareness, a bit of an understanding of your own thought processes, and I think you can step outside of yourself a bit more and assess things. Yeah.
I think I remember you saying as well when you spoke at the conference that you'd done some of your own CBT work essentially on the side. So what can you tell me about that? What kind of thing did you do?
So because it was generic CBT that I was receiving, there was no exposure involved. And I can't remember if I read about exposure therapy afterwards, or if I think I had some intuitive sense that the shape of your head probably isn't as weird as you think it is. And if you just cut all your hair off, it will just be out there for everyone to see, and it almost certainly won't be as bad as you think it is. Because I didn't even like looking at myself with like wet hair, so that, I thought if you just get rid of the hair entirely, it probably just won't be what you think it is. And so I kind of started to do my own exposure therapy. And I suppose exposure therapy can take a lot of forms. It could be exposing yourself to not looking in the mirror, or exposing yourself to looking in the mirror. But in my case, it was exposure in that literally exposing the shape of my head to the world. And so I would cut my own hair, and every time I would cut it a little bit shorter. I still didn't like going to the barbers to have it done because of all the mirrors, and that was still quite difficult. So I think I was doing it myself, and eventually got my hair pretty short. But I gave myself a very bad haircut, and basically had to shave my head, which was kind of the last step of the exposure. But I hadn't really intended to do that. I still wasn't quite ready to shave my head, but it had to happen because the haircut was so wonky. And so there was this real spike in anxiety when I first did it. But then I think the next day I went to work with a shaved head, which I before, a few years before, I never could have imagined having a shaved head and walking around in public. That would have seemed impossible. So I went to work the next day with no hair, and people just, well, obviously they noticed and were like, "Oh, you've shaved your head." And that was basically all they said. And then, just went about their day, and I went about my day, and the world didn't end, and no one was pointing and laughing. And so I think just after that, slowly, my brain kind of readjusted and realised you're obviously not the freak that you thought you were. And then that actually adjusted how I saw myself as well, I think. Looking in the mirror, I think I didn't see things that way so much anymore either. And then I think since then, the other symptoms kind of slowly faded as well. So the checking, looking at other people, comparing to other people, that started to go away until it was basically non-existent. And looking in cameras and mirrors, well, for an unhealthy amount anyway, that started to go away until it was basically non-existent as well. Yeah, it just sort of slowly faded, really.
And do you think the secondary concerns went for the same reason, because you realised that actually, having done something as dramatic as shaving your head and having no one bat an eyelid, that potentially the other things you were thinking...
Yeah, I guess
weren't true either.
Because the shape of the head was the main one, and it was the one that I was able to disguise. I mean, you can't really disguise your cheekbones or your nose so easily. So they were always kind of on show anyway. But I think it was removing that anxiety around the main concern meant that the anxiety about the other two disappeared as well.
And you said, I think, in your speech at the conference, something about shaving your head having been a really liberating experience.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
Well, as I say, it was something that I never imagined I would be able to do. And so I get a real kick out of walking around with a shaved head still. Just gives you a real sense of achievement in a way.
Has that awareness that you can do something like that affected other areas of your life and made you think, actually, I could do X that I've never thought I could do before?
Yeah, it definitely opened me up in a way, sort of in terms of my own confidence. I think when the BDD was quite strong, there would be times where if I'd got my hair just right, and I kind of was able to walk away with the mirror, because sometimes you get that just right feeling, and you're like, oh, okay, I look how I want to look, and you can kind of walk away from the mirror. Then I would get this real moment of euphoria and this real boost of confidence, and I would be like a completely different person walking down the street, feeling like I'm walking on air. And then I would probably say get to the pub or something, look in the pub mirror, and it would be in a different light, and I would hate it. And then I would literally deflate and become this other person who wasn't confident. And I'd probably walk out of the bathroom in the pub, go back to my friends, and they'd probably think, well, he's changed since he went into the bathroom. But it would really change my personality and my body language, I think. Now, I'm always the confident version of me, because I'm not pinning all of my identity on the way I look. So even if I look in the mirror and feel dissatisfied, I still walk away from the mirror as a confident person, and no one would know that I was maybe feeling dissatisfied. And so it really made me always as confident as I could be, I think. And so that's quite life-changing, really. And I think it probably did enable me to change my career a bit. I'd been a teaching assistant for a long time with body dysmorphia. And yeah, actually I hadn't really thought about it, but soon after I would consider myself recovered, I decided to pursue this career in educational psychology. And so, there probably is a connection there, that I felt confident in myself, and then as a result confident to progress my career a bit. Probably because I was able to focus on other things. That's one thing. Obviously doing a doctorate takes quite a lot of focus that I wouldn't have been able to spare when I was really dealing with body dysmorphia. I wouldn't have been able to have the focus to do it.
What would you say the kind of ratio or the balance was in your mind when you had BDD between your kind of internal focus thoughts and your external sort of focus? And how does that compare to now?
It's tricky because I think they overlapped in that I would say 90% of the time the intrusive thoughts were there, and maybe around 25% of the time, that meant I couldn't focus on anything else. But sometimes, I guess it was at a low level, low enough level that I could focus on schoolwork or my job. But yeah, there were definitely times when it really took over. Even, working at a school, I would often have to sort of make an excuse, go to the bathroom because I needed to check, and would spend probably an unusual amount of time in there, come back to the classroom, and I definitely, obviously I didn't tell anyone at work either, but there were times where it was noticed and comments were made, and the headmaster kind of asked me what was going on, and I don't think I told him even then. I think the embarrassment and the shame was a bit too much. I can't remember what excuse I made. So yeah, there were times, I would say it was the thoughts were nearly always there. Sometimes I could tune them out enough to focus on something else, but about 25% of the time they really took over and made it very difficult to do anything else, which is, can be very, very intrusive, can be very difficult, especially if no one else knows.
Mm. And how's that now, would you say? Do you still have any dysmorphic thoughts? Or how much of your attention do you think is taken up by any kind of BDD-related thinking?
Yeah, there are remnants of it, and times when I still get compulsions to check, and if I do, which happens occasionally, maybe take a selfie or something, then, well, first of all, even if I don't like the result, there's no anxiety, just a sense of, I shouldn't have done that, but never mind, let's move on. And I'm able to put it down and just be like, no, I don't want to do that again. And so first of all, I'm able to control the compulsions a lot more. And sometimes you give in, but it's no big deal, really. Mm. And whether there's intrusive thoughts, sometimes, maybe, let's say 5% of the time, but they're definitely not so intrusive that they disrupt what I'm doing. They don't cause anxiety, just that sense of slight dissatisfaction, really. And then 95% of the time, they're not there at all. Mm. So I'm quite happy with that state of affairs, to be honest.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
What's not to like? I usually ask at this stage for your thoughts on advice for other people who might be suffering. I don't know if there's something that you would say to someone really struggling.
I think I would just emphasise that you can get better. And I don't believe that anyone is stuck with BDD for life. I think if you face up to it, and it is effortful, it's difficult, especially the exposure work, because you're facing up to your biggest fear, basically. I think like with any phobia or anything that requires exposure therapy, if your biggest fear is spiders or snakes, then yeah, that's your biggest fear. So it's going to be one of the hardest things you do to face up to it and to confront it. But if you do, I think I would just emphasise that you will get better, and it might be slow. And I think like at the conference, I can't remember who it was, but someone showed this kind of squiggly arrow that pointed to recovery. So it's not a straight line. It's not a linear process. You will have setbacks, and relapses, but you will start to move towards recovery. I think no matter who you are, I mean, I've spoken to people who had, I would say, much more severe symptoms than I did, and now they're in the same position as me. People who were housebound, wouldn't even leave their bedroom, and now they're what they would call recovered. Mm-hmm. So I think, yeah, no matter who you are, you can get better.
Thank you so much, Alex.
You're welcome.
That was brilliant. Thanks so much for coming in.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks very much to Alex for his interesting and insightful story. If you'd like to hear more, you'll find all our episodes on major podcast apps and Spotify by searching for Beating BDD. And if you'd like to leave us feedback, as well as find out when new episodes are out, just follow the BDD Foundation on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube and Facebook. I'll be back with another interview soon. In the meantime, remember that this podcast isn't therapy, so please do seek help from a trained professional. Thanks for listening.